Welcome to Love Light, the only podcast dedicated to bright, fine art photography. Hosted by Sarah Jane Ethan, Love Light is here to celebrate all things bright, pretty and pastel. At Love Light, white is the new black and beauty is in the detail. This is your place to relax, a place to belong, a place to be inspired and connect with like-minded colleagues who share your passion for light and beauty. So come and introduce yourself in the Love Light Facebook group and subscribe to the Love Light YouTube, podcast and Instagram for your weekly dose of inspiration and connect with bright, fine art photographers from around the world.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Love Light podcast. Today, I'm very excited that we have Aimee Grover with us from The Grovers, and she lives in Newport Beach, California, with her husband and business partner, Troy. They've been married for 10 years and they've been working together full-time on weddings ever since. They live with their two boys, Crosby and Landry, and their mini sheepadoodle, Keen. And she has been named, or they've both been named, one of the top wedding photographers in the world by Harper Bazaar 2 years in a row, as well as the top 100 most inspiring people in the wedding industry. Their work has been featured in Style Me Pretty, People Magazine, Harper Bazaar, Martha Stewart Weddings, Us Weekly, Brides Magazine, and so many more, as well as them developing their own preset called the Noble Preset, which I use myself for some of my work. So I'm extremely excited to have you here, Aimee. Thank you so much for giving us some of your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. And so, Aimee, I will have already shared some of your work in the group, and I'm sure many people are familiar with your work already. And you guys have obviously been very busy. You've got awards coming out of your ears and have found time to create your own preset as well, which is a really wonderful, bright, pastel-y film-based preset. So tell us a bit about your journey and how all of this started, this momentous adventure that you've both been on. How did it all start?
Yeah, well, we getting into photography, initially we have been working together as wedding photographers kind of full-time since we got engaged.
Okay.
I went along, my husband kind of started and I went along on one of his first weddings, and then we kind of just kept going and really enjoyed working together, and then that just kind of snowballed, and so yeah, so we just kind of just kept it going for all these years, and then eventually I think maybe we were 8 or 9 years in, and we were like, wow, we're still really doing this full time. Still going.
Amazing.
So yeah, so it's been, we've really loved it, and you know, our style and shooting has really evolved over the years, especially when we started introducing the film component, maybe only 3 years in or so.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so that really kind of changed the trajectory of our business, and just the types of weddings and types of planners that we started working with at that point.
That's amazing. And so how did introducing film into your business, how did that help move your business forward? Why was that so key and such a pivotal moment in your business?
Yeah, so that really was, I like looking back, that really was like probably the most pivotal moment in our business. And I think I really started, I really was gravitating towards that look. I loved the colors. I loved the white balance. I think I'm really into the detail and the final look and the color, and that part like really excites me. And so I started telling my husband, like, I really want to shoot film, and not a lot of people in our area were doing it. And but he finally, it maybe took like a year of convincing, but he finally was like, okay, let's do it. And so we bought, I was like, I just want to get the best. I want to start out, like, I don't want to just, I don't know. I was like, I want to get a contacts, and I want to just like go for it. And so, so that was what we did. And then we ended up talking to one of the planners that we work with a lot. And she was saying, you know, I really like recommending film photographers because a lot of the wedding blogs are mainly featuring film work. And so like Style Me Pretty, Martha Stewart were the big ones at the time. And so so that really inspired me, like, wow, okay, this could be really good for our business, and getting featured more places, and building those relationships with planners who that's really important to. And so so we really started integrating that into our business, and we really started out hybrid from the beginning, which wasn't really even a term at the time. But we kind of did it out of necessity. The area that we live in Orange County, there are some really beautiful venues for like the ceremony site or portraits, but a lot of the, you know, reception and other parts of the day aren't in the best lighting. They're in churches or in ballrooms. And so, so it really helped having digital to be able to, kind of get the best of both worlds. So
yeah, that makes sense. So how much of a wedding do you shoot on film and how much do you shoot digital? Or does it just depend wedding to wedding?
Yeah, it really just depended on the wedding and the light. And but sometimes we would shoot as little as 10 rolls, just to really get. I feel like we really worked hard so that every time we're shooting, we're shooting like we know what we want to get, and I feel like we don't really waste film. We really focus on getting the good stuff and getting it in focus and just shooting it right. So so I think that really gave us the bulk of what we needed at the time, for getting featured, and then also using that work when we were editing our digital, to use as kind of an eye for what the color and everything should be. So that was really huge.
That is so helpful. So you found that actually photographing film, shooting on film, helped you access a more niche clientele, because planners that you were working with wanted to work with that kind of film. They wanted it because the publications were wanting film. And so it helped you just take it up a notch in terms of your business and the type of clients that you were working with.
Absolutely. Yes. We, especially at the time, because there weren't as many, I feel like now everyone kind of has that style, but at the time, that was more of a unique look. And so, so that really did open up a lot of opportunity for us initially, which was really huge. So,
but I looking at film photographers, there's still a big spectrum in terms of the final looks. A lot of film photography can still be quite dark and have dark shadows and high contrast, and your work is very soft and very sunny, and you push the exposures just to really get those lovely sunny colors. And so what was it that made you go down that route creatively with your film photography, to go for that, the more exposed version of film photography as opposed to the slightly darker version?
I think that was just really what I gravitated towards. And even I would say when we first started, I mean, there weren't even the amount of like film labs that there are today, and the education on how to tell your lab what you want. So it was a lot of trial and error, I would say, and it really made me learn light more. I think I started realizing, okay, to get the look that I really want, it's not just shooting film, and it's not even, and in a way, it's not even just light. There's a combination of so many factors. Looking for, I think, even really understanding, like looking for the right type of filtered light and shade, is that really like blew my mind once I was like, okay, initially when you start out, you're kind of like, okay, put the clients under a tree and get them in the shade. And then you realize, no, not all shade is the same. Like there's really dense shade, and looking at the reflective colors, and then also, I think what pushed our work even farther is then looking at the whole picture of a day and trying to photograph the couple in environments that reflect their details, and the whole thing just tells a cohesive story. So
that's such a fascinating thing. Can you think of any examples off the top of your head of when you've done that, when you've interpreted your client's style into their portraits and the locations that you take them?
I think, let me think of an example.
I love that concept. That's such an interesting concept, to actually choose the location not just based on light, but based on your client and what it says about your client. That's a fascinating thing.
And also what it says kind of about the story of their day. I think initially when I start a wedding day and I'm looking at their details, and I'm also thinking of the locations, I think sometimes some of the locations that we're shooting at here in Orange County, where they're getting ready, maybe the hotel is really themed a certain way. So keeping in mind not to maybe, or really to get the overall vision of what the whole wedding is going to look like from start to finish beforehand. So when I go into the room and I'm shooting the details, I know how to style those details with what maybe the venue and the look is going to be later on, if that makes sense.
I love that. You're really thinking the bigger picture.
Yes, totally. And one thing I started doing was talking to the planners ahead of time when we send out a questionnaire, and really asking, what are their colors? kind of what's the style and vibe. And that way I can kind of get that in my mind when I'm styling the details, so that I'm not doing something that's, kind of too, I don't know, this is a very random example, but like something like beachy or, styling things in kind of like a boho way if there's, if later on the reception is, a different kind of style. So
that makes sense. I love
yeah.
that. And so you mentioned when you were starting out with film, there wasn't a lot of people photographing film. There wasn't a lot of labs that you could work with, and there wasn't a lot of education available. Right. So how did you guys navigate the pitfalls and challenges of learning how to shoot film? Were you largely on your own? Were you largely self-teaching, or did you?
Mostly self-teaching.
Yeah.
And at the time, I think there was a little bit. I felt in the industry, it was like you were kind of all film. And if you weren't, like, you were kind of looked down on. Like the film community was very like, you have to be all in, and I thought that was like so beautiful. And in theory, if I lived in an area where, that really worked, because I do think location plays into it. But I think for us, I was just like, it's just not going to work. And then there were a few times where we needed to turn over images really quickly. We did a few celebrity weddings and they needed images the next day. And I thought, man, if we weren't as versed in knowing how to shoot digital to match film and kind of have that cohesive style, that wouldn't have been as easy to pull off. So that really ended up working out.
And you just have to do what's right for you in your business then, I suppose, and not what everyone else thinks. There's a lot of opinions in the photography world. That's something I noticed when I first came into the photography industry. I know there's a lot of very strong opinions about what you should and shouldn't be doing and what creatively is okay and what's not, and just starting to realize actually none of that's relevant. It's what you enjoy and what works for you in your business.
And I definitely think there are some moments that we're able to capture digitally that are just quicker and more fast paced. And I feel like sometimes at the end of the day, capturing that moment, as much as I love like the color and the feel of film, sometimes those moments are really what's important to our clients. And so I think there's definitely a balance there of, what we wanted as artists and then what we're also providing for clients. So
yeah, absolutely. So now how did you end up developing your own preset? I mean, I absolutely love your work, and for the people listening will have already seen your work. We will have posted it in the Facebook group and on Instagram, and so it speaks for itself. And it's so dreamy and so bright and so sunny, and absolutely love it. So yeah, talk us through how you ended up developing your own preset.
Yeah, so I think for me, like kind of getting in on that early hybrid journey, it was, I think, the process for me as a perfectionist, and I was kind of always I was our main editor, and that was always such a point of frustration for me, getting the skin tones. And I think our work has a little bit more contrast and a little more blacks. Some film, is quite a bit softer, but I felt like it was just such a struggle for me to get that perfect balance. And
yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it was just like always such a heartache for me. And I at times I felt frustrated. There were different points in our career where I was like, okay, I really want to make my own preset, but it was really hard. I think it's really hard to create something that universally works across the board in a lot of different scenarios and a lot of different shoots. And so we really, I think when we were just so busy shooting nonstop, I just didn't have the time to explore that. But then it got to a point where I was just so frustrated and I would be so hard on myself, or even just hard in our working relationship. I just couldn't get the images to a place that I was really happy with. And so there was a turning point in our career where I just, my husband, like, he just loves to be on the go, loves to be just doing all the things. And so I got to a point, we had our first baby in 2017, and that was our busiest year.
Wow.
And I was just, I think by the end of that year, I was like, you know what, we really just need some time. Like I just really was craving time where I had a break in our schedule, maybe a few months to just dream up maybe what's next or something creatively. We didn't really know what it was, but I was like, I know it's scary to take a pause and to say no to things, but it was really what I needed. And as soon as we did, I remember, I want to say we took maybe our last wedding was like the end of November, and we took off until I want to say like March or April the next season. And it took us a while to get through editing all the backlog. So I remember specifically it was like mid-January, and we finished editing all of our work, and we had Disneyland passes because we live really close to Disneyland. And so I remember we went to Disneyland, and I just felt that feeling of when you're in college and you like finished your final exams or like a semester is over, I was just like, oh, it just felt so good to like get caught up. And I was just like, oh, this just feels amazing. Like just, and to just know that we had time off. And it was literally maybe that same week that we were like, oh, you know what? Let's get back to our preset. Like we kind of had put it on the shelf. Let's get back to like working on that again. And so we really just like put our head down and started playing with it. And then we really got it to a point where I was like, man, I really feel like this is really good. Like I really like this. And I feel like I'm really hard on myself and really, really particular. So, sorry, I have some.
No, that's fine.
But anyway, so I was just really excited. And so we just like, let's just send this out and start like kind of doing a casual beta testing. Like let's send it to some, different friends and photographers, like who we admire. And friends like on all different parts of throughout the US and people who shot, on different camera bodies and things, and just like have them start testing it. And then once we did that, those people just started giving us feedback like, wow, this is really good and really excited about it. And so I think that just kind of kept us on a roll of like, we should really do this. Like maybe this is our next thing. And so we didn't really overthink it. We decided on the name, and we got our site together, and ended up launching later that spring. And I think we were just really blown away by the feedback and the response of it. And so that was really, really exciting for us.
Amazing. Yes, because the Noble Facebook group is full of people producing lovely images with your preset. That must be such a lovely feeling to see people producing work that they're proud of, and you've helped them to do that.
Absolutely. And I think after having our own photography business for so long, something that was we really had to kind of be the face of it for so long. I know. I think as a business owner, there gets to a point where you're like, oh, I don't really want it to be about us all the time. And I think creating the preset, what was really exciting was it could kind of be about other people and other people's work, and kind of promoting and helping other photographers. And I think a lot of photographers can get to that point in different ways. Also, hosting workshops or doing education. And I think I just was never very inspired in that sense. Sometimes when you get doing wedding photography for so long, I think you kind of forget what you know and what might be new for someone.
So true.
And I think I got to a place where I was like, I just have a really hard time putting together something educationally to really know how to help other photographers. And so this was like just such a cool way to make other people feel confident in their work. And I still feel like, just such a blessing. And it makes me so happy to see people using it and really loving it and feeling so good about their work, because after coming from a place of like really being down on myself and like frustrated with my own work for so long, I know that feeling like, when you get it to a place where, you're editing and you put, the preset on and you're just like, oh my gosh, like this is what I wanted it to look like. Like that's like even from an artist perspective, like that's just such a rewarding feeling. So
that's so true. I totally identify with that feeling, and I remember that feeling very well from the early days of building my own business. And I think when you're a creative person, and I'm incredibly fussy about everything visual, that's just part of my makeup, colors, and it was so frustrating to not be able to get my work to look like how I wanted it to look. And I think, like you said, you can talk endlessly about business, but if you're not happy with the work that you're creating, you're not going to be confident to go out and try and sell yourself. So what you've done is really help people at that really crucial point. And actually developing your editing style can be quite pivotal for a lot of people's businesses in terms of what direction they then go in.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, I 100% agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. So that is just so wonderful. So talk us through those early days, because I think a lot of people are going to identify with what we're saying here, that frustration of not being able to get your pictures to look like what you want them to look like. Talk us through what that journey was like for you. How did you cope? Did you have coping strategies, or what made things better, what made things worse, and just how you navigated that, what can be a very difficult journey at the start of a photography career.
Yes, I think, especially when you're doing photography with a business partner, like for me, I remember looking at film photographers' work early on, and I would look at their work and I would really notice, like, wow, their white balance looks perfect.
Yeah.
I know that like seems like such a silly thing to notice, but I was just like, how do they do, how do you get your photos to, and then there was something about film that I was like, it's so colorful, yet it's not. Like it's colorful, but it's soft. And how do you get that look? And then and then learning how do you shooting with light. Like I remember there was a period in photography where backlighting was really big, but it was more of like the blown out backlighting where it would be backlit and it would make the whole thing kind of glowy and soft. And I feel like that looks really gone out. Like people now like to have things more side lit where you're still getting like kind of a halo effect, but the colors and everything are more true to color. And so I think that's kind of been a journey of learning, how you get that look. And I think as you mature in photography, I think you realize it's never going to be slapping on a preset that gives you that, even though I think presets are huge in giving you the final look. But I also think it's really learning. There's just learning so much about lighting and directing your clients to really kind of marry those two and create the final result.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. So actually part of you coming out of that frustrating journey of not being able to get the work the way you wanted, it was learning how to get it right in camera at the time, and that actually then helped you unlock your editing because the picture was closer to what you wanted it to be to start with.
Absolutely.
Were there key things that you developed in that time as you were shooting that you learned in terms of lighting, or you mentioned about directing your clients to get the thing that you wanted, that actually then really helped you to start feeling like you're in your stride? Okay, now I'm producing work that looks like what I want to be producing.
For me, it was really learning light. I think that is the biggest thing. I love the name of your podcast, Love Light Fine Art. I feel like light is so huge, and knowing when you're in a pinch. I think one of the things I see photographers kind of use as a cop out sometimes is, they'll kind of blame it on the light or the circumstance, and I totally get that. I would say the only time that you can use that excuse is, I would say, maybe during a ceremony, because during a ceremony you're kind of shooting something as is. It's like they're just plopped in the spot and you have to work around it. But I still think you can move around and find little moments where the light is really good. But I think I've had to realize, like, no matter the location and no matter the time of day and no matter where you are, you can find the good light. And it's just a matter of really knowing what to look for. And kind of testing it out. Sometimes at weddings, I would take like maybe the videographer that we were working with, and I would say, hey, come scout with me. And I would use them to kind of see like where the light was hitting them. And I think just kind of getting that overall picture of understanding how light bounces and like I was saying earlier, like different types of shade. That was really huge for me. So I think, once you're able to really find that light, I think that was key. And then the other part of that for me was really getting in the editing rhythm. And for me, on the back end process, trying to get our film developed as quickly as possible so that I always had that film to reference while editing digital. And I think that gave me a lot more reassurance that the whole wedding day will be cohesive, and that from a bride's perspective, they won't even really know what's film and what's digital. That was always my hope. So
that's really good. So film actually just gave you that baseline that you could then build everything else on. It gave you the confidence, okay, I'm going in the right direction with this, because the film pictures, I imagine, were coming back looking like what you wanted, and so
Yes,
they
yes,
just adapt your digital to that. That is so
yes,
good. And so talk to us
yeah.
about how about overcoming kind of self-doubt as a photographer, because it sounds that, you know, those early years were very frustrating and are for a lot of photographers, and you can doubt your skills, your abilities, your whether you're even cut out for this, you know, whether this is going to come together. You know, what was that like for you, those early days? You know, and maybe even still continuing now sometimes, just where you can be hard on yourself or critical of yourself, which I think a lot of photographers identify with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I think is interesting about self-doubt is I feel like you can actually, you kind of would think the opposite. Like you think when you're doing something for a long time, you become more confident and more sure over time, and that, you know, the self-doubt would go away. But I think a lot of times what happens is you actually, when you're new at something, sometimes, like, you know, when you're coming in new at something, you actually sometimes have more confidence because you have less to lose, or you
Yeah,
don't know as much about, um, you don't necessarily have a reputation,
yeah,
um, or you don't really know like the rules and who's who in an industry or
yeah,
something. You're just
yeah.
kind of coming in blindly, and I think it's almost easier to take risks and to be, I don't know, to just not have as much fear. Where I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes as you've been doing something longer, you almost know too much,
Mm,
and that can create a fear.
yes.
And so sometimes I think I try to really think in terms of like, what would I, you know, just trying to kind of have that almost innocence or that new feeling again of like, what would I
Yeah.
have thought going into this if I, you know, you
Interesting.
just care less about what people think because, you know, you just don't have anything to
Yeah.
lose. So I think I've been trying to kind of channel into those, how I felt at that time, or just remember like that newness, and not let those kind of like petty things or worrying about what
Yeah.
people think or that kind of thing really get in the way, because you know, I don't think anyone wants to live in fear and
No,
operate out of fear, and
no.
so and I think it just kind of creeps up on you, you know, and
Yeah. No,
so
I totally identify with that. The very first wedding that I did on my own, and one of our colleagues said to me, "Are you nervous? Are you nervous because it's your first wedding on your own?" And I said, "Oh no, I'm not that kind of person. Like I don't get nervous." And I wasn't nervous. I was just taking it in my stride. And you know, I
yeah,
am a very organized person, so I plan ahead. I think of every contingency, and I'm like, "Yeah, got it covered. Like it's going to be fine." And now I get a lot more nervous than I ever did in
yeah,
those early days. And I think it's because I know all the things that can go wrong. where,
yes, absolutely,
where your camera suddenly starts doing something crazy and you're like, okay, I've clearly pushed a button, but I don't know which button I pushed it now. Like something very strange
yes,
is happening, and you know, and I don't know what, or just random things breaking, or just things that you never could think might happen. I remember coming back from a wedding trying to open the images and they wouldn't open. And I suddenly realized I'd shot on JPEG. And it's because my
oh,
shutter had frozen, and I tested it before the wedding, which was great, which meant I had time to send it off and get it repaired. And it came back. All they were doing was fixing the shutter, but they changed it from RAW to JPEG. Why they did that, I have
oh,
no idea.
oh
They're
no,
just fixing the shutter. Like, why did they change it?
oh
And I didn't
my
check. I
goodness,
didn't. I just thought, all right, the shutter's fixed. I didn't go through and check have they
right.
changed any other random settings
No.
of my
Oh
camera.
gosh.
And so I had these JPEGs, and I was like, and I knew that
Oh no.
the evening I'd taken them off into the sunset, and I'd underexposed to get the sunset. I was going to bring everything back up later, and I was like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to get it. You're like, oh, it's just like felt sick to my stomach. I actually
Oh,
managed to bypass the get it into. I think we were using Camera Raw at the time. Managed to open them, edited them, tweaked the edit slightly. It looked pretty much like my original work. It was slightly different. My client never noticed, you know, even if they listen to this
wow.
podcast now, no one will know which wedding it was because it
Yeah.
looked, but like
Wow.
that sinking feeling, I will never forget. And so
Yes.
going into a wedding now, just thinking, is there something that I haven't checked that I wouldn't even know to check? That I wouldn't
Yeah.
even know is a problem. Do you know, like something's changed on my camera, and yeah, I think that makes me a
For
lot more
sure.
a lot more nervous.
Yeah. And I also think too, just, other, yeah, things could feel like a bigger deal, especially, as you are doing photography for the long run and you are even getting paid more, just realizing,
Yeah.
you're like, someone's paying me a lot to be here and not make those mistakes because I have so much experience and this, shouldn't be happening. So yeah, so I definitely, oh yeah, I can 100% agree with that. I think, yeah, the nerves creep in more than ever as you go.
Totally. Actually, I do very similar to you. I try and remind myself, how did I feel in those early days, and try and
Yeah.
recapture that, because the way I work is quite unusual, because it's incredibly hands off and very candid, which is
Mhm.
not that normal. And what I used to say to myself in the early days was, my clients are paying me for relaxed images, so I need to
Yeah.
be relaxed so that I can create relaxed images. And
Yeah.
I keep telling myself that now, like almost like you said, getting myself back in the zone, going, right, I need to
Yeah.
create relaxed images, which means I need to be relaxed. I need to relax my shoulders, clear my
Absolutely.
mind a little bit, and
Yeah.
just go with the flow, watch what's happening, respond to what's happening, and just kind of be at a little bit of place of peace and rest as I'm there at the wedding. And that helps me
Yeah.
just go, right, this is what I'm here for, this is what they're paying me. They're paying me to be relaxed, so I'm going to be
Yes,
relaxed.
absolutely. Yeah, and on that note, I remember specifically, there are a few images from our first wedding that I
Yeah.
have in my mind, and I think what I loved about them, I remember like we did. It probably was really cheesy, but at the same time, I look back and I'm like, that was kind of cool. Like
Yeah.
I remember. I remember Troy was like on the ground and the wedding party was kind of like running over him,
I
sort
love
of.
it. Yeah.
And it was like such a really different perspective and just like so totally different from anything we would shoot now. But I thought,
Yeah.
I think one of the things that stands out to me early on was there was just more time for play. Maybe
Yeah.
you also aren't as aware of like what the standard shots are that you're
Mm.
supposed to get. And you're not as aware of like timelines. And
Yes.
maybe even some of those early weddings, they don't even have as much of a timeline
Mm.
because it's probably, maybe even a smaller wedding or, but I think I miss sometimes I miss that is
Yeah.
just going like playing and not having. I think the farther you get into photography, you kind of have, even when you're doing like group shots or there are like kind of some things that you kind of have to mark off the list to know that you
Yeah.
got them, and that
Yeah.
can kind of put a different like pressure um or more restrictions on the day. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I
Have you
miss those early days.
Yeah, have you mastered that? How to bring that back into your work now? Because I like that idea of just having time to play and to, I suppose, be
Yeah.
creative essentially, and have fun with your art. Is that something that you're thinking of, for the future? Because I suppose we're always looking for ways to keep ourselves creatively alive and keep engaged with the job at hand. And is
Yeah.
that something that you're looking at bringing back in, or just something that you're kind of dreaming about from the past?
I know. I know. I feel like it is a tricky thing because
Yeah.
sometimes now I feel like we are very fast and efficient, and a lot of the planners that we work with, I think they know that we can move fast, and so I
Yes.
feel like our time we don't always get like as much time, and I
Yes.
feel like sometimes to really be creative and try new things, you need more
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So I think it's tricky to learn how to, or it's tricky to
Mm.
know how to navigate that on a wedding day when we're
Yeah.
not necessarily as in control of the timeline. But I think
Yes.
definitely in like portrait shoots and engagement shoots, just
Yeah.
even just allowing yourself more time to play and experiment and using that as your time, and maybe learning something new to try on a wedding
Yeah.
day when you don't have as much time is kind of the way to go. So
That is good. And actually, something you'd mentioned before the podcast was unusual creative outlets, and inspiration. So
yeah,
I guess that kind of ties into that, how you creatively keep yourself alive and inspired
yeah.
and happy.
Absolutely. And I really think one thing I wish we would have done sooner was really um, kind of gotten more in control of our calendar
Mm.
and really carved out more personal time. I
Yes.
think, especially in where we are in Southern California, like our weddings can really go all year. And I think we kind of got in that hamster
Right.
wheel almost of like just
Yes.
always kind of doing it. And we would still say no to some weddings or clients if we didn't feel like they were the right fit. But
Mm.
I felt like we weren't really saying no to protect our time or like
Right.
really prioritize like, oh, as creatives, or to give ourselves our time, like we need to do this. It was more just like, oh, maybe they weren't a right fit, but it was like, I don't know. I think you get to that point as a creative where it does get hard to just always have your calendar planned out like a year or two in advance. It's like it just never ends. It never ends. So I think as unusual and scary as it kind of can sound to like say no and protect that time, sometimes that's like really the most important thing you can do for your business.
So true. So what do you do now on a weekly or an annual basis? What time do you carve out? Because you said saying no to work. What's your criteria when you know that, okay, I need to say no to this for your own particular family life or your own sanity or mental health or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say this year's a little different for us. We had our second baby this year, and I just said, I really want time. I just want to enjoy that season because I know that it goes so quickly, and I just want to give ourselves time this spring and like early summer, and just focus on that right now, and also focus on our preset business, because I think that's really been giving us that's really such a different type of work, and I feel like that's really been such a creative and exciting thing for us. So we've really kind of been focused more on that, but it's been really nice this season, and it kind of ended up working out because I think a lot of things would have been canceled anyways with everything going on with COVID-19. So so that was really helpful, just having that window, and I feel like now I'm at that place where I'm like, I miss shooting, or I miss that. And so I think that's a really good place to get to. And
I think that's a really good point that you said, that you've got to give yourself time to miss photography and just create that time so that you're not just constantly shooting and actually just losing the love of it. So that's a really good point and really interesting. Well, Aimee, this has been so helpful to have you here, and just so insightful and inspiring. You've had such a long career. So many things have happened, highs and lows and busyness and quiet times. And thank you so much for just coming and sharing it all with us and giving us an insight into your world.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, this was really fun. It was great meeting you, and love what you're up to with all the Love Light Fine Art group. It's really awesome.
Oh, so thank you so much. And for those of you listening, Aimee and Troy Grover have very kindly offered to give us a 10% discount on their Noble preset, which is incredible. So I really recommend that you go and check them out and join the Facebook group as well, where you can see people applying that preset to their images and see whether that's something that would work for you. So thank you so much for that as well, Aimee and Troy, and to give us that discount too. That is so generous of you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, you can find more interviews, tips and inspiration in the Love Light Fine Art community on Facebook. You can also follow along with each new episode on the Love Light YouTube, podcast and Instagram. And don't forget to visit www.sarahjaneethan.co.uk/lovelight for information on training, real-life wedding workshops and online courses to develop your own fine art photography and connect with more of the clients you love.